right, it's Friday. That means we are back with another edition of Punk Rock Politics, the podcast. I am Mitch Maley, joined this week by Brendan Ragan's back.
Welcome back, Brendan. It's good to be back.
So we've got big news right out of the gate. Of course, you know, the biggest story in a long time, the guilty on all charges verdict for Derek Chauvin. I think there was a tremendous amount of not only joy and celebration, but relief, and relief that just the right thing was done.
Yeah.
And that says probably the most about the situation, that there wasn't much expectation anywhere that justice would reign on this, and it has.
Yeah. I think the headline of the event goes to this little small newspaper in Australia that says murderer caught on tape murdering someone convicted of murder.
Right.
Yeah, which is like a little tongue in cheek for another country, but it's rather serious here in the US, where it's like the expectation is not that justice will be served properly. You know, we shouldn't have to. Yes, we can celebrate justice being served, but we shouldn't have to have that level of relief and celebration when juries get it right, because they don't often get it right. So, yeah, a lot of relief and no happiness to be had, but certainly a step in the right direction.
Definitely. So we've had, we talked a little bit last week, and I got some feedback from some people, and it was mixed, on the idea of conflating some of these, lumping any time there's a police shooting, particularly if the victim of the shooting is African American, into the same category.
Yeah.
And my, opinion was, by doing that with the Dante Wright case, just because it conveniently happened in Minneapolis and it was during the trial, and
I think his funeral was yesterday.
Yeah. And again, an egregious degree of incompetence, certainly a criminal degree of negligence on the part of the police officer. But to say that a criminal who is in custody on outstanding warrants and is awaiting charges on a violent crime decides he's going to flee from police officers back into a vehicle, not in any way that the punishment for that should be summary execution or anything like that, or justifies, anything. The idea that that situation was so exacerbated by a criminal's decision to flee police makes it a very, very different thing.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we have this week, we have Ma'Khia Bryant's situation, a 16-year-old girl who was shot by police seconds before, and again, she's an African-American female, who's a white police officer.
Yep.
But again, responding to a 911 call, and as of the latest reporting I see here from the Columbia Dispatch, of course, we're recording it the day before it comes out, but at the time, we don't know. Police have not yet released or established, they said, who made the 911 call, but police arrived on the scene. There was, videos now been released from multiple different body cams, so we see different angles of it. And there's a melee happening in front of the house, a very violent melee. You see a girl go hard to the ground with Ma'Khia Bryant sending her there. And then, police arrive on the scene, tell her to freeze, and she turns from, that one assault toward another girl, saying she's going to stab her to death or something.
Yeah.
And it seems like she's inches away from just murking this girl.
Yeah.
And the police officer, now, again, does he need to put 4 bullets into her? You can debate that all you want. But at the end of the day, we have someone intent on committing murder to another young black girl.
Yeah.
So, her life matters also, right?
It should, and he likely saved her life, or at least saved her from some deal of harm. And I think the criticism, the valid criticism here is that the police are going to the guns too soon and too often. And as a whole, when you take a step back, too many people are dying at the hands of police. Disproportionately, they're black and brown people. I think we all...
Hold on, though. Mm-hmm. That's not actually true.
So, go on.
It's according to allcrime.it, that's not true.
I haven't seen that. I have seen that black and brown people, according to their percentage of the population that they make up is disproportionately represented by people.
We'd have to dig down a little deeper into that as well. So if you look at it and you say, if someone is shot by police, right? You should have that. And then you have first of all, we should point out that police shootings are incredibly rare. When you look at how many times they respond, they're a little bit higher in the United States than they are in most of the developed world, but they're still very, very low. So you're talking about something that only happens a few hundred times a year in a nation of, 400 million people?
It's over 1,000 times a year. It's something like 1,100 or 1,200 people per year.
Again, that's a total shooting, but you're looking, I'm sorry, so you're going down to ones that aren't like a shootout between criminals and cops. So
I think that probably includes...
That includes like if you come on a drug deal going on wrong and everybody's shooting at each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when we get down to an actual interaction between an individual and a cop that ends in a police shooting, you're down to in the low hundreds. Then if you get down to someone that's unarmed, you're down into the high dozens. So, and if that happens, it's more likely to be a white person. When you go a percentage of population, though, that now we have to get into another somewhat uncomfortable conversation, which is that would that be the most correct way to do it, or the most correct way to do it be as a percentage of your share of violent crime?
Yeah, and I think that begs the question then that what neighborhoods are being policed more than others, and what violent crimes are being treated as response rates by police officers.
So statistically, from a statistics standpoint, you have approximately half of all violent crime, according to FBI crime data, committed in the United States is committed by black males. Black males represent only 6.5% of the population. So when you do it just on raw numbers and they say, well, black people are only 13% of the population roughly. So if they are shot at a much higher frequency, then that shows a racial bias. However, if you look and you say if a black male if an African-American is shot by a police officer, the most likely scenario in terms of the police officer shooting them is that he's also black.
Interesting.
The second most likely is that he's Hispanic. The third most likely is that he's
white.
Which might suggest that there's a reverse bias in some situations where the discomfort over situations like this causes apprehension or caution. Now, so when you look at it that way and you say, in terms of, do we have an issue? Now, does this make it less egregious with a situation like George Floyd? Of course not. You still have to look at everything individually. But when you say, hey, we have an epidemic, and that is the media perception that's happening, and sometimes I believe it's because there's not enough challenging of these ones like we're talking about, like the Dante Wright one, and saying, hey, that's not exactly the same thing. Now,
Sure.
Again, you could talk about the incompetence of the mistake, but we're not talking about someone who's
Right. I think one of the things that doesn't totally factor into the number of people that die at the hands of police is the number of people who are simply abused and targeted by the police as well. And there feels like from certain communities that they're being over-policed, charged, over-abused. And then when people die, it's like a match on gasoline, right? Because if we truly only had these isolated incidents, it would be much harder to create. I mean, George Floyd's death changed the world, quite literally set the country on a different course last year. That probably wouldn't happen if the relationship between police and communities of color were different.
There's no question in that. And
Right.
in fact, I said last week that I believe you can draw a straight line to that uncomfortable data point that I pointed out of the fact that black males commit the vast majority,
Or a large part, about half.
about half. So in terms of percentage of population, if we're going to do reverses as how we had said it originally, then they're very overrepresented in violent crime. I think you can draw a straight line all the way back to slavery, Jim Crow, and everything that followed in terms of any time you have a population that is disempowered and is marginalized and is socioeconomically disadvantaged, all of those things that give them less personal agency over their existence, then yes, and this isn't true of only humans, this is true of any animal they've ever studied, is that level of frustration over a prolonged period of time will result in behavior that's increasingly violent. So
Right.
I absolutely, I'm not saying, hey, there's something inherent. Please, what I'm saying is this is a larger, broader socioeconomic problem, but that's the conversation I believe that we're not having.
Exactly.
We're
I think-
reducing it down to
Yeah, I think we're saying solving this issue is a matter of changing policing, which is certainly part of the conversation. Are there bad cops? Yeah, I think just about every department would say there's probably a few guys who shouldn't be doing this job. Is it 1 or 2? Is it 30%? That is a different issue entirely, and that is not going to be the problem that solves this situation. What you're saying, and what I think you're making a good point, is the whole other side of this is that socioeconomically, there are people who are in a position that success is not easy, if at all possible, and therefore crime is more likely. And doing what we can to help those folks is part of the equation.
Yeah, and listen, even going back to the policing part, do I think we need to change the way we police? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think
and I'll
so.
give you one example. The technique that's referred to in criminal justice as going beyond the ticket, and the idea that you can pull somebody over for anything that's, in one of these instances, a air freshener.
Yeah, give me a break.
The rearview mirror.
Right.
That's technically could be, inhibiting your vision behind you.
Give me a break.
Baloney,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we have these little things that are give probable cause for a pullover, and they're only used in order to try to find something else. Is this person, wanted for anything? Is this person, if they're suspicious and where again biases could come in, then, should they be in this neighborhood? Is something out of place? Let me pull them over for one of these things. Right. Sometimes it's been as little as license plates dirty.
Right, or there's a crack in the windshield or some shit.
Pull you over just for your own safety. But while I'm here, let me go ahead and run this plate.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, we've got to do this now.
I'll never forget my very first encounter with police. Because I have to be honest, I was a kid of privilege growing up in the suburbs, a white kid in a mostly white neighborhood, didn't have a whole lot of interactions with police other than like the guy who was the DARE officer at my school, right? So like we have nothing but good experiences growing up as kids in middle-class neighborhoods like that. And then when I was in college, I got pulled over for speeding. And I didn't think I was speeding, but I got pulled over for speeding. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to fight this ticket. It's going to be great. I'm going to go in. Because I asked the police officer when he pulled me over, hey, can I see the gun? Somebody somewhere had told me that's a really great way to do it. And if they don't show you, then you'll get let off. He said, I don't have to show you that. And I don't know what the rule was in Colorado at the time, but I said, okay, fine. Record that I asked and that you didn't show it to me. And privately, I thought to myself, I'm going to fight this in court. So I go to court. There's no radar gun. I think it's my word against his. This is going to get thrown out. And the police officer says, by my visual estimation of speed, he was speeding. And the judge said, do you have training in visual estimations of speed? And he said, yes. Whatever police academy he went to 15 years ago. They probably did an afternoon course on visual estimation of speed. And therefore, my ticket got upheld. And suddenly I felt like, wow, you really can't trust police. And how lucky am I that that's my bad experience, that all of a sudden you've got this completely open ability to ticket anyone, stop anyone at any time because you're estimating that some crime might happen, and that's perfectly allowable in a court of law, that's their evidence. There's no other evidence. So if I'm a person going, okay, I didn't have any weed in the car, there were no guns or anything else, but my life could have taken a very different turn there if there was any other thing that the cop suspected that he wanted to look for.
Definitely. And fundamentally, so police would answer that and say, well, listen, we catch a lot of bad guys this way. I don't want you... We have to have a balance between our civil rights and between the ability to catch bad guys. That's always been a tension between. Yes, police would like to do whatever the fuck they want to get the case all the time, and we see from not only police, but also further up the criminal justice system through district attorneys and federal courts and so forth. We see all kinds of people taking shortcuts when they're allowed to do what they want in order to get the results that they're pressured to get. Then injustices tend to happen.
Right.
So I don't want you pulling people over unless there's a really good reason to be pulling them over. I don't want the license plate was dirty, there was an air freshener hanging, and all these other things.
I estimated he was going fast.
Yeah.
Come on.
Right. So and then the idea that if it's not a criminal, we've seen so many instances in which they devolve into something that from tragic to deadly. And I don't see it's kind of like the high-speed chase argument, where the vast majority of academics and law enforcement are like, look, the data just shows you we've got radars, we've got license plates, we're going to find the people.
Yeah.
You don't need to pull them over, or you don't need to risk killing 10 other people on the road to get somebody who's fleeing from you.
Yeah.
It's just we don't catch enough international criminals this way to justify killing one person who dies in a car accident.
And similarly, I don't think that, when someone falls asleep at the wheel in a drive-through, we need to send an armored police officer to the situation. There are situations that get tougher than they should, but that's like, when you're shaped like a hammer, everything in the world looks like a nail. Yeah. That's when we're sending people that literally have they're dressed like they're ready for combat in a war zone.
The militarization of the police force, which I've reported on for years now, a decade.
You can't tell me that's not adding to conflict.
Absolutely does.
Yeah.
I can tell you as a former military soldier that the posture of dressing somebody in that kind of gear changes your mentality.
Yeah, I bet.
There's no
the
question.
Psychology of that.
When you look back when policing was a guy in a blue shirt and a business-looking tie and a silly hat and a nightstick, right, with a gun on one side, and a regular patrol car, it was a different animal than when you have these vehicles that are all aftermarketed up with all these crazy bush bars and everything like that in front of them, and then on top of it, the guy's getting out looking like a soldier.
Right.
That has an impact, and especially when they're not getting military-level training. Not even close. They call themselves often paramilitary organizations, but I would argue that it's a much lower. I remember there was a case in Manatee County where I interviewed a former sheriff where there was a sheriff deputy who came out of his house to go on duty that day, went to his patrol car, put his issue shotgun on top of the patrol car with his lunch. And then the story later was that his dog ran out and he ran for the dog, and somehow in all the melee, he got confused, didn't realize he left the gun on the roof.
And then the gun is in the middle of the street.
Yeah. And it's turned in later at the police station. And the answer I got from the sheriff was, well, you think he should be fired over that? I'm like, what are you, crazy? Of course he should be fired over that. You know what I mean? He should not be. He's just proven I do not have the intestinal fortitude, or whatever you want to call it, to be the person you entrust with a shotgun, let alone in a situation where I might, under great duress, have to make decisions about ending people's life with it.
Yeah, we're giving people who are operating heavy machinery more training than often police officers are, who have the ability to carry a weapon, a duty weapon. Not just, we can all carry a weapon in the United States, but I think that there is so much to be gained from having a different level of policing, and call it, community action or whatever you want to call it, where, we have peace officers, not police, peace officers who don't carry weapons, who can go to situations that don't require use of force.
Yes. And I really think, had Democrats not been so fucking stupid as to call that idea defund the police, that maybe we could be having a conversation about that right now. But when it comes to slogans, there's nobody who can shit the bed on them better than Democrats.
It's not the best, even when you want the exact same thing.
Yes.
I also agree that reform the police doesn't do much. I think they looked at that and said, if we can't say reform anymore because we want radically different. We want to tear down the structure. We want to get the institutional racism out. We want to do all these things. The only way to do that is defund the police. It's like, well, you actually don't want to defund the police. What you're saying is we want to reallocate funds towards other peace officers, social workers, mental health experts, all of those things. That's the same money. You want different police. And again, we want different police. It's not a great slogan either.
Reimagine the whole concept of what we do in society. Now, it should be noted that there's something to be said for the idea that when you look at modern civilized society, you have a couple 100,000 years of modern humans, right? And we are unique in that we are the only inhabitants of this earth that have domesticated ourselves. All right, so we went from living as animals do, in doing whatever we want, whenever we want, to whomever we want, the survival of the fittest, if you will, into organized and civilized societies that started respecting property boundaries, property ownership, personal agency, and the rights of man, for lack of a better term, or at least some of them. That's unique in itself. But even a couple 100,000 years later, in just about every modern society, in fact, the biggest budget item here in Manatee County, in Sarasota County, and just about everywhere else.
I bet I can guess. Police?
It's all the criminal justice system. It is dealing with the people who do not subscribe to the social contract. So it still remains that antithetical sort of to our nature that a lot of people just say, no, I'm not going to play by the rules.
Right.
But I think we've also grown into this sort of, it's very hard to change large enterprises and institutions. And policing has become what policing has become. And it's very difficult because you have power structures. With those power structures come leverage and empowered individuals. And nobody ever wants to give up part of their budget, part of the size and scope of the enterprise that they oversee. So there's always going to be resistance to that. So but you also then have to look and say, does it make any kind of sense from a logical perspective that you would have a police officer, as we think of them, which is very expensive when you drill down to everything it takes to outfit an individual police officer and get them onto patrol, compared to, say, a social worker. Mm-hmm. And you're essentially asking a police officer to perform the roles really of everything from like EMT to social worker
to like
homelessness counselor.
Yeah, domestic counselors as well. Yeah,
under the sun, and kind of warrior in the environments where you do show up because somebody's robbing a bank and shooting people or whatever.
Which, of course, is such a tiny percentage of calls.
That's what,
microscopic percentage.
That cannot be overstressed, is that the actual criminality part is a very small part of the big picture. And then when you say, well, maybe we could we'd have less conflict if we had more of the other things, so that, like, what are you going to do when the homeless guy is, urinating on the side of your coffee shop? You're going to, there's not another number to call, So if dispatch or 911 or whatever had a, more of a menu of, okay, there's nobody violent, there's no threat to anything. Okay, we're going to send out a community service officer or something that is, you probably don't need someone armed when you have a homeless person defecating in public. You probably, if you have a person who's manic depressant off their meds wandering around an intersection.
Or if you have, like this other story recently where you have a 73-year-old woman with dementia who walked out of a store with some things, and then she was violently arrested and thrown to the ground and her arm was broken. Like, we probably don't need to send our best, most militarized, most heavily armed officers to deal with the situation with a 70-year-old woman with flowers in her hand, right?
Right, exactly. Or even the George Floyd part. I mean,
right. It's a $20 counterfeit bill. Is that what we need to have our heavily armed officers attending to?
Right. And there's the idea of, hey, can we have somebody, even things like tickets? Like, again, if we're not looking to police beyond the ticket and that tactic, which I think is awful, is there an opportunity for, to have people out on the road that are just, hey, that's all I do. Maybe I don't even have to get out of the car. Maybe I just pull you over, and maybe you get the thing in the mail or whatever.
We're giving out tickets to people who go through tolls.
Right.
Why haven't we figured out,
Well, we actually have, a few years ago. It's probably close to 10 years ago was the first time I got one. I was driving through New Orleans, and they have like red light cameras for speeding. And now it was a racket, because what they would do is they would take these thoroughfares and stuff, and all of a sudden you're on a side street, you can go 35, then you get up in something that has 2 lanes and it drops to 25. And, we've got the camera there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But it shows that the tech exists.
Right. Well, and I personally hate red light cameras, because I think prosecuting any kind of violation without a human being being part of the recording process, that's you want to talk about a slippery slope down into a police state. Right. I don't want that.
No.
But can we have, like you just said, a peace officer who drives around in cars, pulls people over, records information, and then says, be on your way? Have a look out for what's coming in the mail. What's wrong with that? Do we have to have the conflict? Do we have to have the officer come to the window with the hand on the gun before before people even say hello to each other? We're one twitch of the wrist away from a violent encounter.
And then it goes all the way up the ladder when you talk about what happens afterward. And here is where there is really 2 spots, one that we opened with, where there is systemic racial bias. And the one is when you have a police officer shoot someone, even egregiously, the odds that justice is going to be delivered to that family has historically been very, very low.
I think I read that Chauvin is the first in Minnesota.
Second in Minnesota?
Second in Minnesota.
Only 4 have ever even been charged.
Wow.
So, and the only other one convicted was a black police officer having shot a white woman. So there seems to be, and there's no question that there's a tremendous racial disparity in terms of the court systems. When you look at everything from if a black and a white person have the exact same offense, which one's more likely to get arrested? The African-American by far.
Right.
Which one's more likely
to get the worst sentence?
Yes.
Always,
always
the black American.
Significant disparity in sentencing. In terms of offering plea negotiations or anything like that, major disparities as well.
Yeah.
So when you look at the criminal justice system, and then you get into all of the nonsense with the amount of times in which you've had the plea bargains, and you have people doing these, well, you only have a public defender, here's what you're looking at. You don't have real legal representation.
You're going to plea out almost every time.
Yes.
And take time as a result, or take punishment, or take a record almost every time, because you've got a public defender who's got 35 other cases, and they're just trying to get plea deals.
I mean, you look at the Central Park 6, that's
right.
The textbook example of that. Minors who were railroaded through the system without legal representation,
right,
under the promise, hey, you can go home tonight if you tell us exactly what we want to hear.
Right. And
you had those lives, again, all minorities, entirely destroyed.
Right, and that's why I think it's good that it was just announced that Merrick Garland's Department of Justice is going to be opening an investigation into the Minneapolis police for what they call pattern and practice investigations, meaning like, do you have a pattern of racial bias in your system? Do you have a pattern of overusing force? Here's another one. Do you have a pattern of ignoring complaints against officers? It wasn't Chauvin's first complaint.
Right.
This guy had a long list of people saying that he used too much force, and nobody ever did anything about it. And let's not forget that horrible statement that the Minneapolis police put out after George Floyd died that said, man dies of natural causes at a police incident. I mean, there was nothing about the violence that had occurred. And clearly they're covering their own tail in that situation. And this is why we've had very few prosecutions, because police tend to look after each other quite a bit. So it's good. Let's look at it. And this is not going to be a fast investigation. It'll probably take a year or two. But if there are truly systemic issues, they need to be investigated. And then there needs to be new standards that we apply to these police departments. And Minneapolis ain't the only one who deserves one of these investigations. Likely.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, I think we have to really reimagine how we want to think of criminal justice in our society. I think the whole entire system is broken.
Yeah.
I think that minorities and people of color suffer the sharpest edges of where it's broken. There's no question of that. And I think a good quote for this segment, this goes to David Graeber. The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily make differently.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, we are going to go to Brendan's bad take of the week.
Oh, man, this is a good one. If you're somebody who has been paying any attention to the Supreme Court over the years, I think that this one will particularly make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Ted Cruz is going to make his first ever appearance in Brendan's bad take of the week. As you may or may not know, Democrats introduced some legislation in the House to increase the number of Supreme Court justices from 9 to 13. Just another thing that's going to die in the Senate for absolutely no reason at all.
And why? That's the thing.
Right. And listen, it's perfectly understandable that Republicans would be against this right now. They don't have the presidency to nominate Supreme Court justices, and they don't have the Senate to stop any nominations to go through. So I could totally understand that Republicans would say, no way, Jose. But Ted Cruz, the king of hypocrisy, took it a little bit further. So during a press conference to announce the Senate Republicans' opposition to the Democratic proposal to expand the Supreme Court, Ted Cruz said, without a hint of irony, that the GOP has never tried to game the system. You didn't see Republicans when we had control of the Senate try to rig the game, he says. You didn't see us try to pack the court. I guess he conveniently forgot about Mr. Merrick Garland, to make a second reference to Merrick Garland in this podcast today, who sat on the shelf for an entire year while the Republicans refused to even give him a hearing.
Mm-hmm. And then
I think then he also has forgotten that the Republicans nuked the filibuster for the Senate to put Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. Then they put one of the least qualified people in the history of the Supreme Court on the Brett Kavanaugh. They put him on the court. That was really nice. And then with 7 days to go before the election, when tens of millions of people had already voted in the 2020 election, they decided that, we actually don't care about the people having a say.
Go right back against their argument against Garland.
We didn't try to rig the system. We played by two completely different sets of rules, depending on whichever one benefited us the most. Then 7 days before the election, they put Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, playing by whatever rules they felt like at any time. But you're right. You never tried to pack the court, Ted. Good one. That one, listen, there's a lot of rank hypocrisy in the GOP. This one really took the cake for me for a lot of reasons, especially because Ted Cruz very easily could have made the exact same argument. He could have said, it'll be bad for America if there are 4 liberal justices put on the Supreme Court. That's it. All of his supporters would have agreed with him. This bullshit about never playing or always playing by the rules and never trying to rig the game.
It's weeks after he went down to the border and did his whole little spiel.
Song and dance.
Now all of a sudden I care about it. I want to point out your hypocrisy, and
right.
I want to show concern for these people that I didn't give 2 shits about for 4 years when I had my nose, I won't say he had his nose up Donald Trump's ass because that nose is so big. I'm not sure it would fit. But
he sure wasn't. He wasn't telling Donald Trump to stop making fun of his wife. He didn't do that. I'll tell you that much.
Ted Cruz right there. It was like, come on, man. At that point,
grow a spine. Yeah. Grow a spine and try not to end up as Brendan's bad take of the week ever again.
Well, in the news rundown, we have someone who probably deserves runner-up for bad take of the week, and that is everyone's favorite conservative, I don't want to say intellectual, I will call him a walking contradiction of logical fallacies, Mr. Ben Shapiro, who tweeted out at CNN's Don Lemon, who is probably the left's version of Ben Shapiro, Oh, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Don Lemon on this. Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah, it was,
Don
yeah.
Lemon.
Because Don Lemon
has been served, right?
Yeah, that's what Don Lemon said in response to the Chauvin verdict.
And Ben Shapiro said, and we all know he would have never said that had the reverse verdict been reached.
Correct.
Right, because justice would not have been served, Ben. Jesus, man.
Didn't take a whole lot of logic to figure out what was wrong with that one.
I will say that probably the most disappointing racial aspect of the whole thing was someone on Facebook that I saw on my feed who was like, I guess a socialite in Sarasota posted, just no politics, just responses. What do you guys think? There was 150 pretty broad, because it wasn't like a fierce partisan person, but it was somebody who's like big in social circles.
Yeah.
So there was about 150 comments already not long after it was posted all in our local area. And boy, was it ugly. I'd say about 100 of them, at least maybe 120, were no way. That was horseshit, or maybe he should have lost his job, but murder? Are you kidding me?
Wow.
Really, really. I mean, just when I think that Florida can't get any more Florida, something like this happens.
Something like that happens. And, well, it doesn't help that basically all of the right-wing news organizations are not coming out and saying that they got the verdict wrong, but are blowing racist dog whistles left and right all around the subject, saying, oh, well, it couldn't have been a fair trial because of the jury was intimidated that they're going to have Black Lives Matter people protesting them, or, oh, well, the jury knows if they return an innocent verdict, there was going to be rioting and looting, so they had to. I mean, it's all just veiled racism or veiled support for the police, whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't help that those are some of the biggest news or programs in the country with some of the biggest viewership, all sort of lamenting the verdict. And really, like, I think that they would have been rather gleeful if it had been if he had been innocent, not because of the implications of that particular crime, but because they would have just reveled in showing the violence of the left.
Yes.
They would have loved to see some riots in the streets, particularly here in Florida, where we have a brand new set of laws governing riots, which is fairly terrifying. I don't know if you saw
Very
those.
terrifying. Yes,
Yeah.
Governor DeSantis putting basically allowing for you to get arrested if you're at a protest, a peaceful protest that turns violent.
And by the way,
And don't participate in any of the violence.
Yeah, and by the way, for even less than that, if you really look at the language, he says that you can be arrested for participating in a riot, and a riot by definition, this is their definition in the new anti-riot bill, is that it's any group of people who are participating in violence or
Disrupting.
disorderly conduct. And disorderly conduct might be shouting.
Almost anything, yeah.
Yes. So does this mean that like all those Planned Parenthood protesters who are outside Planned Parenthood yelling and throwing signs, and then are they in a riot then? You know, I mean, like by definition, I think they are. Yeah, that's a terrifying piece of legislation that needs to be repealed immediately.
Absolutely. In other news, I guess Mathew McConaughey is thinking about running for governor of Texas. And the first poll by the Dallas News University of Texas Tyler poll was McConaughey 45 points, Greg Abbott, the incumbent governor of Texas, Republican, with only 33. So are we in the age of the celebrity candidate?
I mean, we have been for a while, you know. Jesse Ventura, how long ago was that?
That's a good
Arnold
point.
Schwarzenegger.
Ventura, if you go back to it, Ventura was a Minnesota native who also had a long-time political radio show.
Sure.
And had really developed a voice in Minnesota politics. And McConaughey kind of falls in that, I think, much more than Arnold Schwarzenegger does. I did recently read McConaughey's biography, Green
I heard it's great.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's one of the best biographies I ever read.
I need to check that out because I've heard that from all kinds of different people.
It's a beautiful memoir, and I don't think it was in any way trying to lay the groundwork for something in politics. I think the response to the memoir and the interview Tori went on was, hey, I think this guy would be great in politics.
I like his brain. I like the way he,
Yeah.
I'm more worried about the Caitlyn Jenners of the world, who, by all accounts, is considering a run for governor as what's his name in California is facing a recall. And so are celebrities who have literally done nothing but be famous their whole lives. Yeah, I'm scared of those people running our big institutions.
Well, and even with the Mathew McConaughey types, what you have is
Gavin Newsom, by the way. That the name finally came to me, the governor of California. Thank you.
I have a hesitancy because the bar is so low in terms of them just saying reasonable things. And what you tend to get over-representation of, I believe, is sort of the neoliberal centrist among rich celebrities, because you really kind of get this common sense like, well, we should just like put more money in the schools and prisons. Okay, everybody would say that, right? And that sounds great. Who's going to disagree with that? And you say sensible things. And then you're also like, yeah, but I don't think we should tax people's success because I got $100 million.
And I got a lot of rich friends who really don't want me to tax rich people.
And you just kind of get the perpetuation of the status quo. You get the, hey, this is a great country. I know as much as anybody because I've done awesome, right?
Yeah.
And let's just
I came from nothing.
Yeah. So let's just kind of like get rid of like the worst stuff, keep everything else, and just kind of like, let's be cool, right?
Yeah, and then plan the victory parade.
Yeah. So without a lot of like real bona fide chops in the public policy department, and that's what we saw more than anything with Trump is that it doesn't matter what kind of business experience you have. It doesn't matter, what your instincts are. At the end of the day, government, even local government, like when I interview people that are running for like a county commission seat or something like that, sometimes it blows me away that they don't even know while they're running the staggering breadth of issues that are covered by a county government.
Right.
Everything you do from when you get up and you turn on the water to brush your teeth in the morning until you flush the toilet before you go to bed at night and everything in between is run by people that they're going to govern.
Yeah.
The roads, the traffic, the school, the policing, everything.
And I think that there is not enough consideration given to the fact that when you have a position of authority, every act that you commit, every policy that you push forward is going to have a lot of people very upset with you.
Yes.
There's virtually nothing. Yeah. Even if you said we want to make apple pie the national pie of America,
there's somebody who's really pissed because they own stock in blueberries.
Or can point to some racist history of apples. Right. So everything you do, and let's put it this way, everything you do as Mathew McConaughey gets like 80 to 90% approval, right? Even like your bad movies, nobody like hates you as a result of a bad movie. They're just like, I hate that movie, but I still like you. I'll watch the next movie you're in.
True, I just saw him in his last movie. It was awful. Go ahead.
Half the things you do, actually everything that you do as a politician is going to get 50% hate. And they're not prepared for that level of relationship building and that kind of political maneuvering. And so then you get someone like Donald Trump who is like, screw trying to make people happy. I'm going to go to the 30 or 35% of the people who love me no matter what, and I'm going to cater explicitly to them. And so then you have a populist who is playing to a minority crowd. And not that I think that McConaughey, the same thing would happen to him, but I just don't see that someone who was coming straight out of Hollywood has the ability to make those difficult decisions day after day after day in the face of people being super angry about it at every single step.
Yeah, I think what the rejection is right now that's making these people more attractive is they're rejecting the party system of the loyalist who works their way up through the trenches, becomes so indebted to everyone's ring you've got to kiss along the way that they are entirely detached from society at large. And then as a result, they get this real sense of belief that, well, you just don't understand. Everybody else in the country doesn't understand how it really works.
Right. And then they become married to the party.
Viable. Right. That solution will never go through. I'll tell you why. And here's the most, and people are tired of hearing that. People are tired of hearing, listen, we don't want to hear anymore why you two parties divvy up all the pies and then tell us why every common sense solution won't work. We want someone who'll break through that. And I think that's really what Trump seized on, was him telling all of the Jeb Bush types and the Marco Rubio types and the Ted Cruz types, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Now, he didn't do any of it, but he told people, why not? You go in and you do it. You want to build bridges? I'll build bridges. I know infrastructure better than anybody. You want to build a wall? Who knows how to build stuff better than me? Like, he just didn't tell them, well, you know, he didn't give them that talk down double talk.
Right. And it was so obvious at every turn that he had no idea how to govern, that he didn't understand legislation, and he was so focused on only the things that stroked the ego, which, like, when you become a famous person, those are the things that make you successful. If you're good at getting people to like you, you are good at selling whatever bullshit you're endorsing. You're good at getting parts in big movies. Like, if people like you, if that's what your goal is to do, is to just pursue approval rating, you're going to be successful in Hollywood and maybe not that successful in Washington.
Right. That movie, by the way, was Serenity. It's out on streaming now. I would highly recommend against it.
All right, I'll get the biography and I'll pass on Serenity.
There you go. All right, another in the same vein, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene back in the news. Have you heard this week?
Oh my goodness, let's call it the White Nationalist Caucus she tried to create.
The paperwork that leaked out of the America First Caucus policy platform included a culture. It was threatened by immigration because it's a culture strengthened by a common respect for uniquely Anglo-Saxon political traditions. Not even really coded language, right?
Yeah, that's about as loud of a dog whistle as you can blow without coming out and saying
white stuff.
White ideals is what we want to protect.
Right-wing white ideals, and too, not that lefty white stuff.
And this bozo tried to come back and say, after it blew up in her face, and she got 3 people. She actually got 2 people to join. Wasn't it Matt Gaetz, who really, really wanted the news cycle to be anything but, his federal investigation into himself. And then I think...
But every time they mention it, Matt Gaetz, who was just brought up on...
Right,
Listen, dude, you just need to not talk at all.
You need to not be in any news cycle for a while. And then I think Gohmert or Gozar or some Republican idiot.
Yes, and you hear some of the comments he made. I saw a film where he actually got booed at his own thing by, he went into the whole thing about, we know where they come from, places like Pakistan and Bangladesh.
No.
He named countries.
And so, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene comes out and says, well, that was just internal paperwork from some staffer. I'd never even heard of it. It's not my caucus. And it's like, okay, well, if that was a fake idea, how come Kevin McCarthy and Liz Cheney couldn't tell it was a fake idea? Right. They came out pretty strongly against it, as strongly as they come out against things. They didn't name anyone, and they didn't say this was racist. They just said there's no room in the party for such things. Like, real strong rebuke there. But if your party leader has to say those things, that tells me that this is a real proposal from someone. This is absolutely the America First Caucus. Is that what she called it? This is absolutely an idea that they got a little too comfortable from palling around with Donald Trump, who basically was a racist out in the open for 4 years and got away with it, except that he never said white people are superior. That was just about the only thing he never said. And they got caught saying a little too much. I actually think that if you look at the structure of this caucus and you remove that Anglo-Saxon line, it probably flies.
It plays, yeah.
It probably gets 10 or 15 members of Congress to be the Donald Trump bootlicker part.
Well, because they're all looking. Here's another interesting aspect of how the sort of the age of the individuals, we've called it before. There's sort of Matt Gaetz falls into this category, so it's not a really surprise that he would align himself with Marjorie Taylor Greene, in that they're both trying to leapfrog that traditional system. And that's one of the reasons, not even so much their batshit policies and behaviors, but that's one of the reasons why they've got targets on them from the Republican Party, is the Mitch McConnells of the world, and the Kevin McCarthys of the world. They say, hey, listen, we did lick the boots, we did kiss the asses, we did bend the knees, and
we don't want firebrands.
We got the ass on our breath to prove it. And we don't want these people coming up and using Trump's rhetoric and Instagram and social media and the internet to sort of leapfrog
to sidestep
that system, and some people are effectively doing that.
But yeah, exactly. I mean,
on both sides too, because I mean, if you look at, you can make the same argument with, not with as much of the batshit crazy part, but with the squad. You have people that I think they're in the same way filling a vacuum on the further left of the party, the same way as they are on the further right of the Republican Party. And they're finding, hey, there's a lot of voters over there saying we're not represented in the party. We're Republicans or we're Democrats, but we're something different than this mainstream part.
You absolutely have centrist Democrats like, say, Connor Lamb out of Pennsylvania, who take a look at the squad, Justice Democrats, whatever you want to call them, and say, you're bad for the party.
Right.
And you need to tone down the extreme rhetoric. And that's a big divide.
And nobody in politics, I mean, if you put Green, Gates, and every Republican together, nobody has as successfully used social media and modern technology to jump to the front of the line as AOC.
And I got to say, I really like a lot of it. She's peeling the curtain back in a lot of ways, which I find fascinating. I've been following her on Instagram for a long time, just because it's illuminating to see things, to see how the sausage is made. Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said about that being a good thing. But when it's about creating a political star who's a firebrand who can cut to the front of the line, I think you raise a valid point. And the big problem that the GOP has at this time is that there is a wide open lane for this stuff. There's a wide open lane for 30-ish% of the party to look to basically just come out with radical, white nationalist, xenophobic rhetoric and immediately shoot to the front of the party. You can't just simply, and that's why, of course, that they're trying to put it down. They're trying to say that there's no room for this. But I got news for you. I think there is room for that in the GOP, and they're going to have a real issue when it comes to 2024, because somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to get huge support just by coming out and saying we need to protect our ideals against immigrants. That plays in the Republican Party right now, unfortunately.
No question. That's going to be interesting because as of this point, nobody seems to have successfully, as an individual, co-opted the Trump energy.
Yeah. No one is the heir apparent yet.
Not at all. And he just said last week that he is strongly considering standing in 2024.
And I think that even if he's not,
but he said he was traumatized by the experience of how unfairly he was treated.
Right. So
he was traumatized.
So sign up for it again. Right? Yeah. Even if he doesn't
actually,
run.
what he said, this was golden. He said, but it was all worth it because I helped people, and that's really what I'm all about as a person.
Oh, right.
Nothing else comes to mind more than with Donald Trump, the selflessness.
That's why he's doing so much to help people get vaccinated right now.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter did a great thing with river blindness and his post-presidency life, but I really do see Trump capable of eclipsing that.
Yeah, I mean, he's bringing golf back to rich people.
Yeah.
I think that even if he doesn't run, saying that I am running makes him the gatekeeper for whoever is running.
Nikki Haley announced that she won't run
if he's
runs
back.
Again. Yeah.
You got to defer.
And that was after she had pissed him off and then had to go down to Mar-a-Lago and
make things right.
Well, he didn't meet with her apparently.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, and then she gave the whole of course if he ran, I wouldn't.
I'd get out of the way because
she is desperately trying to position herself as the heir to Trump, but she messed up a little bit. And he's not one known for forgetting and forgiving.
No, unless you're Lindsey Graham. He really hated Lindsey to begin with in the beginning of his presidency.
He'll take you if you love him. If you're outside and he converts you over, that's fine.
Right, okay.
But if you're on the train and you waver at all,
you're right.
Once you're on,
then you're
dead.
Off. You're absolutely dead to him at that point. Yeah, once he blasts you, there's no real coming back from it.
You can be on the outside like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and those people. But if he wins you over, then he looks at victory. My charm won you. You're in the camp now. As long as you stay in line, I successfully co-opted you. But if you're under the tent and you ruffle the edges, you're out.
You know who I think right now can lay claim to being Trump's heir better than anyone in the world and should be looked at like a serious presidential candidate, even though it's laughable, is Tucker Carlson.
Yes, no question.
I think he has the keys to the Trump train right now. And if he shifted and said, I'm running, boy, the Republicans would have a mess on their hands.
Yeah. You know what? I was going to say Ivanka at first, but Ivanka I don't think would stand a chance against Tucker Carlson. He has the most watched show on cable.
Yep.
About, I think it's about double the numbers of anybody on the left. I think it's like,
well, actually, Rachel Maddow has made some serious inroads, and she's rather neck and neck with him. Tucker usually ends up out in front, but Rachel actually has taken the lead on some weeks in ratings. Why on earth I know that? I have no idea. But she.
Do you think she would have a chance at a Democratic nomination?
Yeah.
I mean, she's a superstar with the real diehards.
And I would say not as good of a chance as Tucker Carlson has on the right, because they don't look at qualifications the same way.
But here's the part of it, though. When you say the they, are you talking about the voters, or are you talking about the corporate media and the party? Because
probably both, honestly.
I think Democratic voters would be every bit as eager to take someone. But what you've seen on the left is that the New York Times and the Washington Post and MSNBC can just kneecap somebody.
Yeah.
As they show with Bernie Sanders, and they can just keep saying very loudly that you're not going to win, and then you just don't.
Well, and they can also accidentally turn a hill into a mountain too, and I think that's sort of what they did with Trump. So it's like they can only kneecap you if you're on the left, honestly.
Well, what I would say with the Trump part was my impression. I was covering that election at the time. Was that the corporate media, and I really feel that one of the things where the fourth estate lost its way was during the Trump's presidency, they started convincing themselves as part of their job to stop him.
Yeah.
And that's where they lost all their credibility, not to report honestly and doggedly cover him, but we need to stop him, and we need to take considerations as to whether fair and proper coverage to do that, like we talked about for the Hunter Biden war. So let's just ignore this because we'll end up with more Trump. It's a great. Well, that's the greater of the evils is not what the media is supposed to be parsing, particularly the non-opinion, straight news media. But I think with Trump, I really think they thought elevating him was a good thing. I think Hillary thought so too. I think they're all aligned with. I remember hearing reporters say, "Oh my God, can you imagine if the Republicans actually nominate him?" And I was like, yeah, I can imagine him winning. In fact, I think he might be the only one in that field that would win the election. And a lot of people.
And Hillary wanted him. Hillary, it's very well documented that she was
and
opening the door for him.
And I think that was the start of it. And you have so much of a gross, overlap between the DNC and corporate Democratic left-leaning media, like the ones I named, that I think they very all quickly got on that same page and thought, I remember hearing people saying early in that this will be the end of the GOP for 30 years if he gets the nomination. They thought they were not only going to guarantee Hillary being the first female president, they thought they were establishing a dominance that was going to last decades. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, you guys really are in a bubble in the Beltway.
They platformed him.
Yeah.
I mean, they platformed him. They gave him more opportunity to reach people than any candidate on either side, including Hillary.
Well, they did two things. One, they're like, look, the polls, he's going up. Wouldn't this be crazy? Wouldn't this be funny?
It's a circus.
But then the other thing they noticed is, holy shit, a lot of people are watching, so it's good for money too. Yeah. And it's like they never put the two together. Not everybody's watching the train wreck, asshole. Some people are watching with hard-ons.
Yeah. And Trump knew it too. He said, y'all are going to be screwed without me.
Yep.
And now they're not. But he knew.
Ratings did drop off.
Big time. Which is like almost a good thing, I think. Let's stop our hysteria with every possible movement in Washington.
No question it's a good thing.
Which is good. So we're not all paralyzed in every single news cycle. But is the New York Times failing? No, they're doing better than ever. Is the Washington Post failing? Not really. No, they're doing just fine. So he's not going to bankrupt these places by going away, but they were all getting extra hits when they covered his craziness, and he knew it. And so, he played that game, and I think Tucker Carlson, to return to that point, could play that game just as well. He knows exactly how to fire up a news cycle with a stupid, controversial hot take and then bask in the eyeballs around it unashamedly, with people pointing the finger at him and saying, you're racist, you're nativist, you're xenophobic, all these things. And he just loves those eyeballs.
Oh my God. Ben Shapiro would be his VP candidate too, wouldn't he?
Oh God.
Carlson Shapiro 2024, is that what we're looking at?
I just threw up in my mouth.
He might be the most dangerous potential Republican candidate outside Donald Trump would be Tucker Carlson.
Mark these words when this podcast comes out. Like put an earmark by it, favorite it, and let's return to it in however many 3 years. And
all right, maybe that'll be the title: Tucker Carlson for president.
Yeah.
All right, don't forget to join us every Friday for the Punk Rock Politics podcast, and please like, subscribe, get notifications, tell your friends about it, and go to punkrockpolitics.com. For Brendan Ragan, I'm Mitch Maley. Have a great weekend. Oops, wrong one. Sorry.